They told him to leave, that the funeral was for generals, not forgotten soldiers. He was just an old man with a cane holding a wreath no one had asked for. But when he tried to lay it down, a young officer blocked his way, until a 4-star general saw his face and saluted. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? They told him not to come, that the funeral was by invitation only, that security would be tight and protocol stricter than usual, because the man being laid to rest had once commanded entire divisions and walked the halls of the Pentagon with 4 stars on each shoulder. But 84-year-old Master Sergeant Benjamin Rourke didn't listen. Didn't even slow when he stepped off the bus with shaking legs, a folded paper in his coat pocket, and a metal pin to a blazer that hadn't fit properly in years. Because this wasn't about protocol to him. It was about promise. About the last words a dying general had whispered in a Korean trench over 70 years ago. About a funeral where Rourke didn't want to be honored, just seen. Just allowed to keep a vow forged in blood and shivering mud under enemy fire. And when he stepped onto Arlington's crisp grass that morning, white tombstones stretching like disciplined soldiers into the horizon, he gripped the wreath tighter in his wrinkled hands, ignored the pain in his back, and made his way through rows of uniformed officers and guests, drawing glances, then stares, then whispers, because there was something different about him. Not just the silver beard or the limp or the Wheat-Twee-era Bronze Star, but the weight he carried, invisible but undeniable, until a young lieutenant in ceremonial blues stepped into his path, with authority burning in his eyes, and a radio clipped tight to his chest, saying, "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back. This area is restricted." And Rourke stopped. Confused, not defiant, but stunned, blinking up at a boy young enough to be his grandson, trying to explain with a voice dry from the cold. "I served with him. I need to place this," gesturing to the wreath. But the lieutenant didn't budge, even raised his hand as if Rourke might do something dangerous, as if this frail old man limping on a cane might disrupt the clean, rehearsed image of the military's perfect farewell. And when Rourke tried again, pulling the folded letter from his coat, signed by General Keating himself before his final deployment, another guard stepped in, radios crackling, voices tight. The small crowd watching in awkward silence as the funeral band fell quiet, and the casket team paused mid-march. Because something about the scene had shifted, the tension palpable, and just when the lieutenant reached for the wreath, intending to take it from Rourke's hands himself, a voice thundered, "Lieutenant Myers, stand down," and every head turned as 4-star General Addison strode through the honor guard, medals gleaming, boots crunching on gravel, eyes locked not on his subordinate but on Rourke. And in 3 long steps, the general stopped, clicked his heels, and saluted not the casket, not the flag, but the old man. A silent gesture so powerful that every officer nearby followed suit instinctively. Confusion etched into their faces, because no one knew who Rourke was, only that the highest-ranking officer there had just paid him more respect than anyone else that day. And when the general stepped forward and embraced him, saying softly, "He told me about you," Rourke's legs nearly gave out, his face crumpling with emotion he hadn't let anyone see since 1951. And together they walked those last few steps, the general supporting him gently as the rifleman stood straighter, and the bugler raised his horn. And when Rourke placed the wreath beside the folded flag, he whispered, "I kept my word, Tommy," then straightened as best he could, eyes misting over, before turning to the assembled crowd, officers, civilians, reporters, all watching in stunned silence, and with a voice that hadn't spoken in public for years, he told them what happened on Hill 122, when a 19-year-old infantryman named Thomas Keating had taken shrapnel to the chest and bled out in Rourke's arms, whispering, "If I don't make it, tell my mother I died brave, and if I do, bury me like the men we lost," and how Keating had survived that day but never forgot those he'd led. Writing to Rourke every year until his final deployment, even signing an order, now clutched in Rourke's shaking hand, that guaranteed him a place at his funeral, not as a guest but as the man who saved his life. And suddenly the silence cracked as the lieutenant who had blocked him stepped forward. Tears in his eyes, removed his white gloves, and said, "Sir, I didn't know, I'm sorry." But Rourke only nodded, too tired to hold a grudge, and the general gestured for the chaplain to pause as he turned to the media, ordering the cameras to roll as Rourke's story was told. Not just a funeral anecdote, but a forgotten piece of military history. Story of a man who'd saved a future general and then faded into civilian life with no parade, no pension, no thanks, just quiet dignity, and a wreath he'd built himself with the names of the fallen woven into the ribbon. And after the 21-gun salute, after taps echoed over the hills, General Addison invited Rourke to ride with him in the procession, an honor reserved for family or fellow generals, and as the convoy rolled past rows of soldiers standing at attention, one by one they raised their hands in salute, not for the general, but for the old man in the back seat who had once carried another man through enemy lines with bullets snapping over his head and fire licking at their heels. And when the day was done, and the sun dipped low behind the trees, Addison asked Rourke, "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" And Rourke smiled softly, replying, "Because I wasn't the one who needed honoring, just the one who remembered." And the next morning, when the military press published photos of the event, the image that went viral wasn't the folded flag or the 4-star casket, but a single frame of an old man with a cane standing beside a wreath, his hand raised in trembling salute, while behind him, a general stood with head bowed and a lieutenant wiped tears from his cheek. And across the country, veterans called in to share their own stories of promises kept and friends remembered. And Arlington visitors asked where the old man with the letter had gone, not realizing he had taken the first bus home that night, back to a one-bedroom apartment lined with photos, medals in dusty frames, and a single chair facing the window, where Rourke sat watching the sunrise the next morning, hand resting on the envelope with the general's seal. The last promise fulfilled at last, and somewhere deep inside him, for the first time in decades, he felt at peace.